What is going on, Badger fans? Really excited about this one. We got the great Evan Flood coming on the show. We're going to talk football recruiting. We're going to talk Greg Gard, basketball, all of that and more on a show I'm really excited to do on Wisconsin, and let's get it going.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. Really do appreciate everybody tuning in. Great guest today. We're going to waste no time getting into it. We got Evan Flood, 247 site host, content creator, longtime Badger reporter on the show. Evan, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, and I know you said don't bother with it, but I do want to give you the opportunity. Where can people follow you? I mean, what you do on 247 is awesome. So I want to give you the opportunity to talk about that.
Yeah. Websites 247 Sports Wisconsin, Badger 24/7 if you Google it or whatever. On Twitter, Evan_Flood.
All right, let's get into it. I want to start with football. We got a lot of basketball stuff to talk about, but spring practice is coming up. I kind of want to start here with is it possible that Wisconsin is building up expectations that they can't quite reach?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we're going to know a lot more in spring to see how this kind of comes together with all these new faces in there and different systems trying to blend together. You talk about Phil Longo trying to bring an air raid style offense to a bunch of guys who are used to ground and pound. You're talking about a defense trying to mix in a 3-3-5 with a 3-4. And, they've been recruited to play different ways. Obviously there's not one way to do any type of scheme. You can have a 3-3-5 with some 3-4 concepts and kind of mix in with what Jim Leonhard wants to do. But, you specifically defensively is where I think I'd have the most concerns if I'm a Wisconsin fan, just because you got that Jim Leonhard style defense ingrained in these guys of, okay, let's crowd the box, let's create pressure and kind of keep that game within the tackle box. Now you're going to a 3-3-5, a lighter box, more defensive backs, who you're kind of relying on to make a lot of plays in space and play on islands. And that's kind of sort of been the bugaboo for Wisconsin's defense. Teams that can spread them out and create mismatches are the ones that do really well against them. And, so Luke Fickell and Mike Tressel haven't exactly brought in a ton of those types of guys yet. Fortunately, I think, Wisconsin at the safety standpoint, that they've got multiple bodies there that can, fill in and play different roles. They've always been really versatile, and that's where I think the best athletes are. So I think they'll be fine after a while. And obviously it's a very weak schedule that's going to help. I mean, there's a very realistic possibility you get through the regular season with one loss and you get Ohio State at home too. And, we've all seen what presumably a night game at Camp Randall can do for a program, can take a good team to be a great team on that night. So I don't know if it's going to be unrealistic expectations. However, I do fear that, based on, kind of judging how the fan base has been with the basketball program, if Luke Fickell wins 7, 8, 9, maybe even 9 games, that honeymoon's over really quick because, like you said, the expectations are sky high of what people think he's going to do for the program. So, obviously, I think on paper, he's got the talent to win the West easily. That's never been a question for Wisconsin. You could say even last year on paper, they were the best team in the West. The question is, can you get all these new transfers to blend in with the current guys on the roster in such short order and get these guys to buy into your scheme and maybe get these players who have never played anything like this to excel in that as well?
Let's keep it on defense for a second, because I think the biggest concern I have is the pass rush. You lose Herbig, you lose Benton. And quite frankly, this is the first offseason in a long time I can remember that you don't have that guy penciled in as the next great pass rusher. And what are your level of concern there? Who is that guy if he's on the roster?
It was a problem last year too. It was either Nick Herbig was getting to the quarterback, or a lot of times it was nobody. And now you take that guy out of the lineup, like you mentioned, Keanu Benton, who disrupted so much for that defense. Even if he never got to the quarterback, you saw the guy leaving the pocket early, getting rid of the football earlier than he wanted to, being able to take on multiple blockers and kind of just blow up plays in different ways, even though it may not have resulted in a tackle for him. And he still did a fair amount behind the line of scrimmage as well. The outside linebackers, I think, we went into last year thinking the cupboard was really stocked, and we found out these guys still have kind of a long way to go. I don't think Daryl Peterson was necessarily had the year we all thought he was going to, even though we figured he would kind of be in more of a reserve role. Obviously, he's still flashing, but he's the guy that I think has to take the next step for this defense. I mean, he was a crazy sack artist in high school. I think had over 40 some sacks, during his 3 years on varsity. Kind of still transitioning. He was a defensive end in high school, and I was standing up. And again, I don't know how this 3-3-5, if that's what they end up going to, how this affects that, because all of a sudden, you're taking a lot of these guys off the line and putting them, 3, 4, 5 yards deep. Like I mentioned, there's no one way to do it. You can line them up wherever, but essentially, if we're talking about a base 3-3-5, that's where they're going to be, and they're going to be asked to do different things. But I think it starts with that front three. Those are the guys that are the unsung heroes of this defense and always have been. Are you going to get guys like Isaiah Mullins, James Thompson Jr., Rodis Johnson, not necessarily to make those plays beyond the line of scrimmage, but eat up space, take on multiple blockers so the linebackers can do their things, because everything starts with them. And again, I don't know. We haven't seen spring ball. I don't know how they're going to do this. They've talked about combining the 3-4 with the 3-3-5. They want to keep the front seven is, and then the run defense, basically what Jim Leonard does, and combine it with Cincinnati's pass defense. What that looks like, I have no idea. My guess is as good as anybody's right now. But, if we're talking about getting that pass rush back, it starts with the front three and their ability to take linemen off the linebackers so they can do their jobs and make those special plays.
Yeah, and I want to keep just on football for a couple more questions. Are there any storylines or players that you don't think people are talking about enough that you're interested in?
I think everybody's probably focused on the transfers, and that's kind of where my eyes are going to go when I get to spring ball. It's going to eat up a lot of my time. But I would say guys that aren't transfers have been around here. We talked about the pass rush, Aaron Witt. Wisconsin staff has been raving about him for years, and we haven't seen him since he was a true freshman. If he's healthy, I've seen him behind the scenes, for 6'6", 255. He's got quite a get off the ball. Again, that's a guy who might get caught up in this scheme too, and may take a step backwards, because you're talking about 6'6". And again, if you go to a 3-3-5 where you're pulling him off the line, that's going to be a lot tougher for him than what he was doing at Wisconsin. Where he could sometimes even put his hand in the dirt if you wanted him to. But he's a guy that I think could be an X factor for this defense and help take it to the next level if he's healthy, which has been a long time. He's been walking on a boot for the last 2 years ever since I've seen him. And I think, they released some spring practice videos or some workout videos. I can't remember if he had the boot removed or not, but I saw him in there a while ago. So if he's healthy, he's a guy that I'm definitely going to be watching. As far as offense, I think someone maybe we're not talking about enough. Riley Mahlman, maybe. I think he was a guy we expected a lot from last year. Kind of up and down, riding the wave as a freshman, first time starter, got injured. If he's healthy and playing the way that he's capable of, because he's got such a high ceiling as a guy that was a former tight end in high school, 6'8", just monster kid with long arms, got all the prototypical attributes you want from an offensive tackle. And he's a guy I think that could take the next step and really hold down that left side or right side of the line wherever he ends up playing. Obviously, new staff, we have no idea where these guys are going to line up. So it'll be a whirlwind there. But because Wisconsin was so, their overall numbers in against the pass rush were actually kind of good, but I think anybody watching that team was kind of banging their head against the wall every game, because there'd be a lot of moments where there'd be miss blocking assignment or just whiffs on blocks. I think he's a guy that's really got to help solidify this offense and play to the level that he's capable of and reach that high ceiling maybe quicker than he's ready for. And like I said, he's a converted tight end for the most part. So he does not have a ton of experience at that position. But if he can hold down the edge of the line there and give presumably a more pass happy offense time to pass, I think that'll be big for this offense.
Yeah, I think you have a great point, too, with the new coaching staff. It's something we've talked about. Players are going to move around that we're not expecting. There's going to be new eyes on everybody. I want to finish up here with football, then move into basketball, Greg Gard a little bit, and some recruiting questions. I have a sleeper player on each side of the ball. On defense, I got Avion Jones as kind of my sleeper, as someone I'm excited to see. And on offense, Cade Yakimelli. Who do you think I'm more right on that's going to play a role this year?
I would say Avion Jones, just because we didn't see Cade at running back. He started the year at safety when he was there at fall camp and then moved midway. So I don't know. I liked him more as a safety on his high school tape. But Avion Jones was a guy I absolutely loved coming out of high school. I think he was, I forget, I do all these articles, but I either had him as the most underrated or, so one of the, whatever title it was, I thought his film was terrific. And, obviously he's got the versatility to play corner or safety, bounced around a little bit, but seems to have found a home at corner. I know he gave up the big play, I believe, against Oklahoma State in the bowl game there, but you just watch him move. Wisconsin doesn't get a lot of guys like this who can tackle in space plus length corners who can run. I think he's just scratching the surface, and he brings a different element on the back end with just kind of the all-around playmaking ability as a ball hawk, and then somebody who can come up and stick his face in the fan and make a tackle too. I mentioned spread offenses giving Wisconsin problems. Well, this is why you recruit a guy like this, so you can move all over the field and has no problems, making tackles on an island. I'm eager to see what his body looks like, because even though he was one of the better true freshmen at fall camp last season, he was pretty raw. He's got a frame that you could put 10, 15, 20 pounds on and not sacrifice any of that athleticism too. So I think he's a guy, especially with the corner position, was, under Jim Leonard, it was just, you never knew week to week who was going to be out there for the most part, beyond the number one and number two guy. It just constantly fluctuated. I think he's got a chance to solidify that group, maybe not in necessarily a starting role, but one of the first guys off the bench, play a little nickel for you. I would expect to see him on the field quite a bit, again, assuming the new staff likes him as much as the old staff does.
I love it. That's great stuff, man. I'm going to buy more Avion Jones stock. Coming up next, we got a bunch more with Evan Flood. We're going to run out of time before we run out of questions. That happens with all of our great guests. But we do want to take a very quick break for our friends of the show over at FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sports book, our new sports book. With the NBA season winding down, NBA Finals coming up, it is the best time to sign up. You get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 back. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, super easy to use. Bet on everything from the money line, point scores, three-pointers drained. Listen, I've talked about my love for the Phoenix Suns. That's still where my money is now with Durant down. You can get that at a little better. Suns good to the finals at plus 650 now. I think that's a bargain. Take that bet, cash it out in the future, buy some swag with it. I'm all in on it. Once Durant gets back, that team's going to be a monster. Plus, lots of exclusive bets, player props, points, rebounds, assists, combine it all into same-game parlays. Don't miss your chance again to get your no-sweat first bet, $1,000 in bonus bets back when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, let's get Evan Flood back on here. And again, Evan, just great. Thank you so much. So grateful for your time and jumping into the show with us.
Yeah, no problem.
Let's talk Greg Gard. Let's talk Badgers basketball, something that has been a bit of a hot button topic. I've heard you talk about it. I've read some of what you've written. I'm really very much aligned with where you are on this. I don't think Greg Gard should be on a hot seat. I think it's a down year. But is this year? I want to frame it in a way where let's say everybody comes back. Is this team have enough internal growth to be better next year if it's the same starting five and the 23 recruiting class?
I don't think so. I mean, I think it's likely they get better. How much is that going to push them over the hump from what happened? I mean, you can look at it two different ways. I mean, they had so many games where, it's one play here, one play there that, they're more than capable of making. I mean, they're sitting on 20 some wins right now. You talk about Michigan State, the 2 Northwestern games, Kansas, Wake Forest, Purdue. I mean, the season could look completely different. And like I said, mid-season after they started 12-2, I mean, everybody was talking about Greg Gard as the national coach of the year because they were not supposed to be that competitive at all earlier in the season. It just so happened, they didn't finish as well as they should have. Now, how much upside is left if everybody comes back? I would say it probably depends on, can you learn from your mistakes and finish this time? But in terms of guys getting significantly better, I think you're starting to see the best of Max Klesmit right now. I think you're starting to – Steven Crowl would probably be the guy I'd look to that – and it's probably easy to say after what happened last night where he scores 36 points against Bradley. But I think, a lot of people laughed at some of the comments Greg Gard made about him being on the Mount Rushmore of bigs. I'm like, you got to remember – there was a time where people would have laughed about that about Frank Kaminsky too. And technically speaking, he's far ahead of where Kaminsky was at this stage. Even though Crowell's a junior, Kaminsky redshirted. So technically, in terms of where they are now, Kaminsky didn't merge for another year and have that game against North Dakota State. Crowell's doing it now. Not that I think he'll end up in the same ballpark, but I, get where Gard is coming from. And, he's ridden such a roller coaster this year. We've seen the highs. And there have been some really bad lows with him. Can he even it out and be consistent? Because I think he is the guy that kind of has to emerge as the number one for this group. Chucky Hepburn, I think, is a little similar in terms of riding that roller coaster. I don't know where his ceiling ends, and I don't know where the floor starts for him night to night. There's nights he looks like an all Big Ten guard. There's nights, Wisconsin hurts with him on the floor. He's a guy that's got to get more consistent, but at his best, I still think right now he's, one of the best, if not the best young point guard in the Big Ten in terms of what he's capable of. Not that he's always played like it. But the bench, I mean, how much, are they really going to give you? Kamari McGee's been good in spots. Carter Gilmore, for what he is, has done an admirable job, but he's not a guy that's going to get you 8 to 10 points and give this offense the firepower it needs. So I do think they need to get, like I said, I think this is what I said last when I talked about Greg Gard, but I think this team's closer than people think it is. I mean, I've always said you give them 2 reliable bench players, I think this season goes completely different and helps them get over that hump that they just never seem to be able to get over. And then, like you said, the 3 freshmen coming in, I don't expect huge things from many of them in year one, but I think John Blackwell can help is kind of a tenacious defender, upgrade you athletically in the backcourt. Gus Yalden, is I think he's going to be somewhat comparable to what Brad Davison was in terms of what you see as a freshman is what you're going to get. He's already highly skilled, physically developed. He's ready to go, but there's not a super high ceiling in terms of development that's going to take place year to year. It's going to be, more baby steps. And then Nolan Winter, I think he's probably going to be somewhat comparable to what Nate Reavers was in year one. If you need him to play, he can play. Plan is probably to redshirt him, add some weight to him. But, just getting some depth, I think, is going to be huge for this team. But I do think it's imperative that they hit the transfer portal and get at least 2 guys that can help you. And I'm not talking project guys from down the year. I'm talking older, more experienced guys, and at least one scoring minded kid that can take some of the burden, especially off a guy like Chucky Hepburn, and handle the ball at times.
Yeah, and I felt, just to your point there, I felt Chucky at times gets a little bit more the blame than he deserves because he's put into situations to hit the last shot, and I don't really feel like that's his bag right now all the time. I think he's more of a good guard who is a bit of a force multiplier with better weapons around him, better pieces around him.
I think he's struggling with having to be the guy. And last season didn't necessarily prepare him for that. And, it's not necessarily his fault when you play with Johnny Davis, a lottery pick, and you play with Brad Davison, who's started for 5 years. So is watching him in high school too. I mean, his MO and DNA is not to take a lot of shots. And I think that also that comes to a surprise for a lot of people that constantly get after him about his shot selection, especially when he goes to the step back threes, at the end of the game, or that step back on the baseline. That's just not falling right now. But, I watched him close in high school. He doesn't like to take. That's not his DNA. And I think, after the Maryland game, everybody got on him too, because he took 2 or 3 shots and they were getting blown out. And so I think he came to the realization, I can't be my old self and be passive like that. And I think that does make him uncomfortable, having to carry so much of the offensive load. I've been to AAU games where he almost didn't shoot and looked disinterested in shooting. I'm telling you, that's not in his DNA to go jack up 15 shots. Now he can do it. He's a good shot creator. I mean, we've seen what he's able to do. And I think, if you take everything and not just what happened the second half of the year, but in terms of what he's done in the clutch over his 2-year career, I think it favors out more for him than he gets credit for. I mean, he had a game winner against Penn State wiped away because Seth Lundy hit some garbage shot. Had one at Marquette too, after he came back and sat for, what was he out? 19 minutes before he came back in, and Marquette got one to send it to overtime. Had a big one against Michigan State, at Michigan State his freshman year. And then obviously the Purdue thing, how you want to look at that because it banked in. I guess it's up to you. I personally don't give him a lot of credit for, but it went in, and that's all that matters. So I think I think the biggest thing for him, like I said, you got to get the transfer portal, somebody I think that can take some pressure off him, because I really do believe it's not his DNA to take 10 plus shots per game. I think he loves deferring. I think he loves dictating the tempo, loves defending, as we all know. He's got that gene, clutch gene late in games to be able to come up with a steal. So I would, if I'm Greg Gard, I definitely would target a scoring minded combo guard who can handle the ball and take some of the point duties away from him too, just to make his job easier.
Yeah, and that just leads into my next quick question, and we're going to wrap up on basketball with that. And then just a couple of listener questions as well, and then we'll let you go for sure. Is he going to be successful this offseason, in your opinion? If you had to guess, are we going to look back at this offseason for Greg Gard and say he did what he had to do?
That's the $1 billion question.
Right.
Because the good news is I think there's going to be about 4 or 5 Wisconsin natives that he could possibly go get. Now, Jackson Paveletzky entered the portal today. Mm-hmm. That one, I'm unsure how it goes. I don't. He's just not a Greg Gard guy in terms of what Gard usually targets. Especially from point. I know he's not a true point, but his size is going to probably put him at that spot. And Greg Gard typically gets these bigger, stronger lead guards. Jackson Paveletzky is not that. Now he's a lethal assassin. I mean, he can absolutely score it, but he's kind of a little bit comparable if people remember Riley LaChance, who went to Vanderbilt, and it was like, well, you're good enough, but can I hide you defensively with the way we play? I think that's going to be the question for him. But there are a couple other names out there that haven't entered that I think will, which will give. I don't think he needs to do a lot. Like I said, I think you're 2 reliable bench players. I mean, I'd try and go for 3. I'd try and hit a home run here. Obviously, you got scholarship space you got to worry about and figure all that out too. But it's tough to get transfers at a place like Wisconsin. It's a lot tougher if you have 5 starters returning too, because these guys, especially upperclassmen, this is their last go around. They're not looking to come off the bench or play a secondary role. I mean, they're looking for minutes. This is it for them. And it's really hard for a place like Wisconsin that's historically too been a developmental program and rewarded seniors and juniors for sticking around. And guys know that. And so that's why it's always hard for them in the transfer portal. And it's getting harder with NIL, with 6 digits being thrown at kids up front, and Wisconsin's not going to play that game. I mean, they're going to get more competitive. I think they are getting more competitive as time goes on in that department. But, it's tough for me to say that Gard's going to hit home runs here, but I think we don't even know what are their 8. How many guys are in the transfer portal right now? I saw it's already a record. There's going to be a ton to choose from that we don't even know about yet, too. And Duke, Kentucky, North Carolina, wherever, can't get them all. Some of these guys, if you can find Chris Vogt types, Max Klesmans, just 2 of those types, I think make a huge difference for the roster you have next season.
Yeah, I agree. That depth is a huge consideration. Let's get a couple really quick questions. And then, like I said, we're always going to run out of time before we run out of questions for Evan, getting a guy like him on the show. Red Dog asked the Janowski camp, anything new? I mean, I know you've talked about this. It comes up a lot with Janowski, the in-state shooting guard.
So what happened was Wisconsin got an early commitment from Jack Robison, as everybody knows. That kind of threw in a wrinkle into everything. Not that I'm a big believer, and I don't think anybody should be looking at scholarship space in today's era where, you typically lose 2 or 3 guys every offseason anyway. But they kind of see him as a 2, possibly a 3, depending on who else joins the class. Now, the question is, who else is going to join the class? And right now, the top overall target is Con Knippel, a 2 or a 3. And they also need a true point guard in this class because Chucky Hepburn will be a junior next year. And he's really the only true point guard on the roster beyond Kamari McGee, who's, if all things go well, is never going to start a game for you. But I think they're still in wait-and-see mode on this one. I know there's not a lot of dialogue going between the two sides, but that's happened with a lot of people. I mean, Gus Yalden up until March wasn't really hearing from the staff. Once they go, they go. So I think, that he plays AAU with Con Knippel. Wisconsin will be there watching. So, yeah, I wouldn't call it dead. I just think they need to see what happens with Con, whether or not they're going to keep him in state or he's going to go to Virginia or someone else. If Con turns him down, I think that opens up a lot for Nick Janowski. Now, personally, I think it's a mistake from where you're at to not push your chips in there, because even if he's the, not plan A, but if he ends up being the gem of your class, I still think he's a guy Greg Gard can win a lot of games with, and he helps you with a lot of stuff you don't typically have right now. And, you get into these games, you look at what happened against Indiana, you look at what happened against Northwestern twice, where you just can't put the ball in the basket. That's happening too many times over the last couple years on these Greg Gard teams. This is what Janowski does. I mean, I don't know if they have a guy beyond Connor Essegian who just knows the ball is going in every time he shoots it and just has that level of confidence. And Janowski's a lot better scorer on the ball, with his ability to handle it and create off the bounce than Connor is. So I think eventually, just my guess that they come around. It's nothing more than a guess, but like I said, I think a lot's in wait and see mode, and it's going to be more clear this spring. But I can tell you this: there's going to be a point where he's going to move on. Could be tomorrow, could be April, May, June. I don't know when it is, but there will be a point where he looks at the people who want him the most, and Wisconsin's on the outside looking in if they do want to get in. So a lot's riding on that Con Knippel recruitment right now for sure.
What's your really quick feel on Con Knippel in terms of what his timeline is and where do you think he's probably ending up?
He says, closer to September. Now, my feeling and what a lot of people have told me, I think it's Wisconsin or Virginia, maybe Marquette. I think they're kind of in that next tier. I know, he has a really great relationship with the staff, and obviously they're right in his backyard. But, in terms of basketball fit, I think you go to Wisconsin or Virginia. But before you go to Marquette, no knock on them, just the way he plays, fits those other 2 programs to a T. So I know he had a great official to Virginia, and they kind of knocked it out of the park on that one. I think he's, still a Badger fan at heart. It'll be close. Wisconsin's probably got a little ground to make up. We'll see if that official for Virginia loses its luster. But Wisconsin's, right there, from everything I've heard. And I think distance, may end up being what gets him to be a Badger. Big family. Both his parents were outstanding basketball players. He relies on them a lot for his skills. So being close to home, be able to watch all his brothers play, I know would be a big deal. But, it's Tony Bennett in Virginia, like Joe Krabinoff once told me, I'd send my kids to play for Tony Bennett, so he's going to be tough to beat.
Yeah, that's well said. One more quick question here, then we'll wrap up there. I didn't get to every question, which I apologize for, but I don't want to keep Evan for too long.
I got time if you.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
I got a couple more questions. You're cool.
Okay, yeah, we can go.
Let's go.
Baby's asleep.
I love it. Mine are asleep as well. This is from Shell. Status on Corey Smith, Jordan Marshall's flipping over to football recruiting here with the running backs.
Corey Smith, odds are probably Wisconsin. I don't think it's going to be imminent, but I think he's another guy that him and his family really value staying close to home. The interesting thing is Wisconsin's in a lot of running backs, and you talked about Jordan Marshall. What happens, if you get one of these other guys to commit first who are similar. Now, I can't speak to what the staff's approach is going to be. I would guess Corey Smith's a take no matter what, even if it's a day before the late signing period. I'm guessing they would take him. Now, whether or not Wisconsin can wait that long and not take anybody else, I think is the big question. But I like Wisconsin there. I know the Penn State offer, the new one that he just got, was big. Notre Dame and Tennessee are two others he likes, but Wisconsin's from what I've been told has been out recruiting those two by a mile, and has made it very clear they want him above everybody else right now. And he just took some SEC visits, didn't come away with offers. Alabama was one, so that could be something to monitor here in the summer too. But right now I think Wisconsin's in a good spot. Jordan Marshall, I don't expect Wisconsin to get him, but I always get asked, who's the guy that Wisconsin could surprise for or is in better shape than people think. He's definitely number one or number two on my list. Just because he's got great relationships with the staff that came over from Cincinnati, mainly the head coach, Luke Fickell. I played with one of his sons. They lived, very close to each other in the same town, if I'm not mistaken. So he's known those guys for a long time. And obviously it doesn't hurt that Wisconsin's had a heck of a running back tradition. Wisconsin in the top five. I can't remember who all the other five are off the top of my head, but I'd watch Ohio State and Tennessee at kind of the top of those right now. My gut tells me Wisconsin comes close, but doesn't quite get him. But I think everything's still up for grabs on him.
Oh, that's great. And that actually dovetails into the next question, also from Shell. One or two dudes this cycle you could see committing that will be surprising people. Marshall, certainly one of them you just talked about. Is there another guy kind of out there that Wisconsin might surprise people with?
Ronan OConnell, I don't know if that's a surprise, but he's not a guy that I think a lot of people are talking about, and he keeps things close to the vest. Probably, I think a lot of people assume Tennessee because he's a Tennessee kid with a Tennessee offer, but the old staff did a really good job on him and got him on campus. Like Grant Steck, who committed to Wisconsin, though O'Connell was recruited by Cincinnati and had a relationship with a lot of those guys that came over. So he's kind of one of those, in that same mold that, Wisconsin benefited from the coaching turnover. Word is he wears a lot of Badger gear back home, whether or not that means something. It usually does, but, it's not anything you take to the bank. But he's a high 3-star kid with a loaded offer list, offensive tackle, if I didn't mention that. Tennessee, Miami, Florida State, Auburn are all in there, but I could see him kind of leaving there for Big Ten country.
Next one up from B Tomps 07. Ask him what's maybe the holdup with some of the in-state offensive linemen not jumping on Badger offers. Deep class, obviously talking about, but correct me if I'm wrong, these aren't guys that grew up in state necessarily. Like Roy grew up out of state, correct? Or am I?
Yeah, Nathan Roy's from out west, so he got to McGuanago his sophomore year, so he's not a typical in-state offensive lineman that, I think, had he grown up here, probably jumps on it, because he feels like a Badger kid just from out west. I think they still have a very good chance with him, but just got the UCLA offer where his brother plays. I think he's got to look at that, and some of those other West Coast are. He's got Ohio State too, so I think in time, if I had projecting today, I'm going off very little confidence, but I would have him in this class. Donovan Harbor, I think Wisconsin, Ohio State are going to be in this in the end. And I know that scares a lot of Badger fans because they typically, Ohio State's one of those programs that's had success coming in here and plucking offensive linemen, but it's going to be another one of those, in my opinion. And then, Derek Jensen, I don't really know what's going on with him. He's a guy that, doesn't like to do interviews from what I'm told. I would think, based on his offer list, that'd be a guy that jumps on this. But, you look at what the staff is doing. They've got close to 30 offers extended to offensive linemen, which is a high number to begin with. It's even higher when you got in-state guys to choose from. So I know Wisconsin leads for Marcus Harrison out of New York right now. So, he's a guy I could maybe see getting left out of it, but I'm kind of just speaking off my gut right now, not anything I know, because Jensen's, very quiet and reserved and, doesn't do a lot of media. So I really don't know where, they are with him. But I'm just putting 2 and 2 together on there with the high amount of offers. And, some of the guys Wisconsin is in deep with, like I mentioned, O'Connell, Harrison, and others. They got a lot of guys coming to campus here in the spring too. So, if they get 1 or 2 guys and you still got those other, 2 big in-state recruits, Roy and Harbor out there, and it's not a safe bet that, they are able to get a guy like Jensen.
You think 4 or 5's the number at offensive line this year?
It feels like it. Yeah. They didn't do a lot in the last cycle. So obviously they got to make up some ground there. And, brought in two transfers that could kick some other people out. So I could see a situation where, they don't want to go into 2024 short on numbers. So I would say 4 at least.
3 more quick questions. The first one, we can do these quickly. Tyler Wahl coming back, yes or no?
Everything I heard was yes. And then he didn't cry, but he was holding back tears after Ohio State when somebody asked him about this being potentially his last game. And that made me second guess everything I thought I knew. His mom also posted on Facebook. This was before they switched the seeds. So Wisconsin was a 3 seed at the time in the NIT, that this was, Tyler's last game at the Kohl Center. I'm still saying yes, but
it's a cautious yes.
Yeah, it just both those things kind of threw me. Every conversation I had was he was coming back, and the team had kind of rallied around the idea of bringing everything back and making a big run next year. So I'm gonna stick to that, but I'm a lot less confident than I was a week ago.
Gotcha. If you had to project out, who do you think are the top 4 pass catchers for the Badgers next year in terms of reception?
Well, Bryson Green, Shimmery DK are the easy ones, right? I think you keep Skylar Bell in there. He just had too good of a freshman year, and I really like him. I don't know. I don't know enough about CJ Williams. I'll put him as my 4. But I think, people, because of the 5-star rating in high school, are maybe expecting him to kind of hit the ground running and be a number 1, number 2 guy. I don't know that he's there yet. We'll know a lot more in spring. I'll keep him as my number 4. But, you obviously got Marcus Allen, who's, been here 2 years, done some nice things, opted to come back. Keontez Lewis was a big play guy for them last year. I'm sure he's not necessarily looking to just hand over his role, after the year he had, despite limited attempts. So I'll throw CJ Williams into that last 4, but just out of I'm a company man, and he was a 5-star guy, so I'll roll with him.
Go with the hype. All right, last question here. Which head coach closes better? Bielema, Christ, Gary Anderson, or Luke Fickell?
Well, it's not Christ. Christ. God. I mean, it's obviously Luke Fickell right now, but he's got the least amount of we got the least amount to work with, but he did such an incredible job in the transfer portal. I don't know how you could go with anybody else. It felt like every guy they wanted, they got, with maybe 2 exceptions. I mean, I can think of 2 guys off the top of my head that they wanted and just didn't get. They didn't get them to campus either. Every guy that got to campus, they basically closed right then and there. Now we'll see if it translates to, the 2024 recruiting class and, going forward. But right now, I mean, that track record is I can't give it to Bielema. I can't give it to Anderson. It's got to be Fickell. It's got to be Fickell.
Nah, it's great, man. Thank you so much for jumping on the show, staying a few minutes extra. Evan Flood of 247. We are smarter because you were here, man. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you. Had fun.
On Wisconsin, and hopefully we'll get Evan on at some point again.